Truth be told, I'm not too excited about Shadow King, but let's talk about him anyway. Shadow King is a 4-cost, 3-power card with the effect on reveal, set all cards here to their original base power. First time we've seen an effect like this in Marvel Snap, so it's interesting. It's not the first time we've seen a card set the power of another card, but it's the first time we've seen like base power as like a piece of text, so cool, I guess. Plus, it takes up a deck slot, so it's already got quite a bit working against it. With that said, this card will certainly be able to single-handedly beat certain deck archetypes, which is more or less what you want from a tech card. Again, though, it is expensive, and it takes up a deck slot. When I first read the card, I thought he wouldn't be strong enough to reasonably consider him as a deck slot, at least in a ladder environment where it's a little harder to justify certain cards. And when I first read the card, I was actually misreading the card. I thought he would actually apply to the entire board, but no, he just applies to the cards at that location. So needless to say, I'm actually not expecting very big things from Shadow King because he's significantly worse than what I initially perceived him as. But who knows, let's just focus on the positives for a moment. We'll get back to evaluating him. He's a 4-cost card, so that means that he gets discounted by Zabu. That's worth keeping in mind. He technically has favorable stats for Mr. Negative, but the upside is minimal, and I'm assuming inverted cards have their power reduced by Shadow King. So for example, if I was to play an inverted Iron Man, he would be a 0/5. Then I would play Shadow King, and I think Iron Man would revert back down to 0 power. Meaning that I would still get to play a 0-cost Iron Man, but it's probably not worth running the two together for that exact reason. All of that is to say that if you're playing Shadow King, you're probably doing it in a very honest way. Unless it's maybe a Zabu control list that runs like 100 tech cards, which might actually be a viable deck. Maybe? I'm not sure. I haven't played much of Zabu, and I certainly haven't played much of Zabu control archetypes, so really difficult for me to evaluate that idea. Let's say you're lucky enough to pull Shadow King, or perhaps you're bold enough to purchase him. Let's go over a deck that I would use as my starting point for Shadow King. As I said before, Shadow King is a tech card, so you probably don't need to build around Shadow King. A much more practical way of using the card is probably going to be more or less plugging him in the existing deck to react to the current metagame. However, that's not as fun for a video, so let's try to build around the Shadow King. As I hinted at before, we're going to build around the fact that Shadow King's a 4-cost card, so let's add in Zabu, Shadow King, Shang-Chi, and Enchantress. From there, we're going to need a way to put power onto the board, so I thought of this revolutionary idea. We're going to run Leader in our deck, and then in order to play our Shang-Chi after we play our Leader, we can also add Magic, so that we can play Magic on 5, Leader on 6, Shang-Chi plus some other stuff on turn 7. During games that we don't draw that combo, we need a way to be able to put power onto the board, so I decided to run the She-Hulk Sunspot Onslaught package, because it also happens to combo well with our Magic that's already in the deck, letting us pass on turn 6 and then develop an insane amount of power on turn 7 with both She-Hulk and Infinite. Because we happen to run those big heavy-hitting cards, let's go ahead and also add Jubilee, who also happens to have favorable interactions with our Zabu. And then from there, I decided to add the Goblins because they combo well with our Leader. As an alternate build, I've thrown together what is a pretty typical Cerebro 3 list, but we've just decided to jam in the Shadow King. Main reason for this is because he's a 3-power card, so he happens to combo with our Cerebro, but he also, if I understand correctly, his on-reveal will happen, setting the base power of everybody's cards, but then the ongoing from Cerebro is still in place, so Shadow King will bring everything back in line to 3 power, whether they were reduced or added to somehow. Maybe the opponent played Hazmat, or they Scorpion, or maybe you even played an Okoye for some reason. Shadow King will bring back everybody's stats to 3, and then your Cerebro ongoing will still persist. So Shadow King will effectively have no effect on your board because you already want all of your stuff at 3 anyway. And then you'll get your +2, and then the opponent will just be set to their whatever their base powers were. So maybe sometimes minus power for the opponent and sometimes quote-unquote plus power for you. It is worth noting that ongoing effects in general are probably pretty decent with Shadow King, just because the effect applies first and then the ongoing persists afterwards. But oftentimes, if you're running ongoing cards in your deck, Shadow King is plus power for you and minus power for the opponent, assuming they've applied buffs to themselves without ongoing effects. But again, that's why Shadow King is more of a tech card than a card we can build around, because it more or less relies on what the opponent's running rather than what we're running. So that's going to be our entire discussion for the Shadow King. Let me know if you're excited about Shadow King. Personally, I'm not vibing with him. He's not for me. I'm not going to be too excited about this card. I mean, I'm going to be happy when I pull him just to have him as a card, but it's not one that I'm excited to build decks around. I will say, even though I'm not particularly excited about getting this card, it's probably a good card to have in Marvel Snap. You've got tech cards for most of the areas of the game. You've got tech cards for ongoing, on reveal. Having a tech card that specifically sets cards to their base power, it sounds like it's more of a niche area of the game, and it is definitely more niche than, say, on reveal or ongoing, but I think this is a good safeguard to have in the game regardless. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.